Early on in this New York Times documentary that I came across this week, a young doctor in Manhattan greets a man on a cell phone video chat. The man, who's sitting in his apartment in California with a cello between his knees, begins to play. Cut to the doctor in a dim hospital bedroom, her brown eyes blinking gently between her mask and her hairnet, holding the phone out in the air. You can sense rather than see the patient before her. Music soars from the phone, haunting and kindly, as the figure on the little screen sweeps and bends over his instrument. The doctor's name is Rachel Easterwood. This is the gift that she's found to give as she's watched the COVID-19 patients in her ICU night after night struggle to live and sometimes fail. By early April, the hospital had already lost 59 people. And then one of the ER doctors took his own life. Feeling a need to do something, Easterwood, who'd trained to be a professional clarinetist before going to med school, reached back into that world to recruit a small team of musicians and begin streaming these live mini concerts from their quarantined apartments to the patients on her ward. Soon they had expanded the offerings to the medical staff as well. At one point, you can see them huddled around a device in the cove of a hospital hallway, their eyes crinkling over their masks as they listen. I've been thinking about this story all week. And what struck me is that in a funny way, it's not about the music. It's not just about the music. Easterwood could as easily go to Spotify or YouTube and set her patients up with some of the greatest performances of some of the greatest pieces in the world. But it wouldn't be the same, would it? It wouldn't restore that sense of human warmth to the situation. What is that thing that we need, that connection, that presence, that co-regulation of rhythm and breath? It's really not about the music. It's about someone playing the music in the listening presence of someone else, even over 3,000 miles of air and wire. It's about this communication, deeper than language, shared between these people in this moment. It's about what happens when, despite all the obstacles, two or three find a way to be gathered together. And here's the other thing. At one point in the film, Easterwood recalls the first patient that they did a concert for who was unable to interact in any way. Standing over the person, she had this sense that everything she'd done in her life had led her to this moment. Everybody was really feeling their own mortality, she said. And she remembers thinking to herself, well, if I don't make it through this, I've done what I'm supposed to do. If I don't make it through this, I've done what I'm supposed to do. Our faith language has a word for that, calling. I think in our culture, many of us have been led to believe that finding and following a calling is a joyful thing, maybe even an easy thing. Follow your bliss, as the pop psych commandment has it. And, there is bliss in becoming useful to God and doing things we find ourselves given to do and loving the ones we find ourselves given to love. But if you're like me, you may have been less prepared for the ways that calling can be painful and bleak and sacrificial. We may have to reach further back or further out to access that wisdom, to people like Martin Luther King Jr. or Oscar Romero or Dietrich Bonhoeffer, all of whom paid with their lives for what Bonhoeffer called costly grace. And on down the long line of Christian martyrs to the very first one, the disciple Stephen, whose stoning is recounted in Acts today. Look, he shouts, gazing into the sky. I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. And later, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And finally, echoing Jesus on the cross, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. If I don't make it through this, I've done what I'm supposed to do. Now, look, I know this is kind of dismal material. I certainly hope that none of us is forced to give up our lives for our calling. I, for one, would have a lot of cowardice to overcome to do so. I don't imagine Rachel Easterwood went into medicine expecting to give up her life either. But I feel as if we've suddenly been cast into this time of testing, this troubled time that sharpens some distinctions for us as people of faith. And one of those distinctions is this distinction between bliss and calling. Would Stephen or anyone else have said that he was following his bliss in this story from Acts? Would Easterwood, in bringing musical connection to lonely and terrified people, say she was following her bliss? Bliss is transitory. Bliss comes and goes. Calling connects us to something more rooted, that grace and forgiveness, that larger vision towards which we strive, that sense of purpose. If I don't make it through this, then I've done what I'm supposed to do. It seems to me that Easterbrook's story captures everything we need to know about being the church in this moment, the creative way that she finds to overcome isolation and connect human to human, to answer that question of what she's supposed to do. That question has new urgency for us as a church in this era, as our political life slips further into the brutal scapegoating of the vulnerable, and our communal life frays into ignorant tribalism, and our economic life consumes workers as if they were no more valuable than the things they produce. As hunger, homelessness, and desperation spread across the globe and seep up into our own neighborhoods, who are we called to be? What human connection are we called to offer the world? How can we as a church discern and follow our calling so we too can affirm that even if we don't make it through, we've done what we're supposed to do? Amen.